Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So today I am super excited. We have infamous vegan YouTuber Mike the Vegan here.
Hey, it's great to be here.
One of my favorite channels. If you're not already following it, which you probably are, you should go subscribe because he puts out some of the best vegan content on YouTube. And the reason it's one of my favorite channels is because it is fully evidence-based. So you spend a ton of time doing research for these videos, finding studies to talk about, why a whole food plant-based diet would be the most beneficial. That's basically what you've come to the conclusion of, right?
For sure.
Why is being evidence-based so important?
Starting an evidence-based channel was important to me because I was looking at all the other YouTubers, vegan YouTubers in particular, at the time that I was starting, and no one was backing up any claims. They would just say stuff like, you can get B12 from seaweed. You don't need to take B12 at all, or things like that, or just making a really drastic claim without anything behind it. And that, you might as well say anything. You might as well say
that's the internet.
Yeah, that's the internet, yeah. And so I was like, first of all, that's not very persuasive if you're trying to get people to eat healthier and save animals and help the environment and stuff. So my evil vegan agenda wanted me to use evidence. And secondly, that's what made me change my diet. That was the information that got me going. I wanted really good information. I was a hard person to turn onto a plant-based diet, onto a vegan diet. And so it's hard for me to not want to be obsessed with evidence when it's what shifted me away from thinking I needed to eat animal protein, otherwise I'd wither away, to realizing that you have all of the essential amino acids within plants in the amounts that you need. Things like that.
So do you get much pushback?
I've never gotten pushback for quoting studies, except people who don't like what I'm quoting and say oh, it's cherry picked and you're trying to do, you're just, again, the evil vegan agenda. And so, I'll end up debating people about stuff like that, but I've never gotten pushback for using evidence, really.
If you come across studies and you find something that maybe doesn't represent veganism in the best light, do you still talk about that too?
Oh, for sure. And things are getting better too. I would always say, obviously, we really need to focus on B12 because we had some studies back from further showing that B12 deficiencies were higher. And now, from a recent study at least, they were about the same out of Switzerland. And that doesn't mean they're the same everywhere. That's one study in one place. But, the concerns change. And I will say, just because I'm using evidence doesn't mean that I'm a 100% perfect, infallible human being. I've made 250 videos probably by now. And so I've made mistakes of accidentally quoting things that weren't fully statistically significant or something like that, but I try to correct them, and the vast majority of what I've said is still what the literature says, so I'm not oh, everything's ruined because I said one thing that wasn't true.
Well, I think that's super important. We put out a podcast, maybe some of you guys remember, we put out a podcast on reverse dieting and its benefits, and then 2 years later, after a lot of what we, not just were reading in studies, but also what we were witnessing with our own clients, our opinion on this very much so changed, and we retracted it. We deleted that podcast entirely from history. But I think being able to say either we don't know yet, or I was wrong, I think that's really important. And a lot of people who just say anything are not. They need to be right. So how do you think that people who do make these really wild claims without anything to back it up, how do you think that's hurting the movement?
Well, first of all, there's always going to be a certain portion of people that are just saying things that are untrue, a certain amount of myths that are perpetuating. There's probably some myth that we believe in and some myth that might have a little bit of scientific support that we find out isn't true. For example, that dairy calcium thing where, milk is so acidic that it leaches calcium from your bones. Well, that's not exactly the case. It appears that there's no real proof of that, and in the case maybe it's saturated fat clogging arteries and causing weaker bones and higher fracture rate, and that's a complicated issue. But there's people that go out and just say crazy stuff, and obviously they would be way better off if they did research. The problem is not everybody has a scientific background or even a high, some people don't even have a high school education. I don't mean to throw names out there, but I'm pretty sure that Tim Sheaf didn't have a high school education and drank his own urine, believed that the earth was flat, still believes that the earth is flat, I believe.
I think so.
And if he had a science background or science, education, or at least a full, even high school science education, he would know more of the facts and more of the science and the recording methods and all the things like that contribute to us knowing that the earth is round. So basic facts like that are in jeopardy right now. And so for me, it's I never want to make a claim that doesn't have peer-reviewed research right there, or at least a very compelling reason, or if it doesn't, I'll say this is speculation. And so that's the angle I come from. But there are definitely people who are out there who are just spouting nonsense, and it's probably not helping people.
And I feel like it's a lot of times when people put out these crazy claims without anything to back it up, there's like, oh, well, I did this and it worked for me.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in a place where people want to listen to what you have to say, you can end up hurting people to the point that you actually push people away from veganism or a plant-based diet because they're like, well, I did this, I got sick, this doesn't work for me. And I think that it's really, it can be very, very dangerous. In best case scenario, it's worthless. Worst case scenario, it's dangerous.
Yeah, for sure. And I think of like, there's some, the same thing's happening on the other side in like the all meat diet and stuff. And even doing something bad, if, with the placebo effect and with just how your body changes over time. And for example, there were probably people who were prescribed cigarettes by their doctor, and whatever their problem was got better. Maybe it was going to get better anyway. And so they become the ultimate anecdote of maybe why smoking helps get rid of like foot pain or something, And so we have this issue of like anecdotes only so powerful, and that's why we need the studies, and that's why we follow, the hierarchy of evidence where, an editorial isn't as good as a randomized peer-reviewed controlled trial and stuff. So that's my take on it.
And I feel like as plant-based eating, vegan lifestyles become more common, we'll hopefully be seeing more research on these things, because there's so many studies that just haven't been done that it's hard to say for sure X, Y, or Z. So some of it has to be speculation based on other studies that have been done.
Yes, and I will say that just because someone's speculating doesn't mean it's not true. It just means it hasn't been demonstrated yet. It hasn't been proven is a strong word, but it hasn't, we don't have enough evidence in the literature to say it's true. Like there's probably something, we were talking about fasting here, having some light debates about it. There's probably some things that if we study about fasting, we find out were incredible. And so we can't say, we have the anecdotes, but we can't say that it's necessarily going to happen or not. We can't say that you're going to automatically be able to like shrink a tumor or something because you're not feeding yourself. That just wouldn't be a scientifically valid claim. But it could be in 10 years when we have a peer-reviewed controlled, double-blind placebo-controlled trial where we have one group of 200 people fasting with tumors and one group of 200 people that didn't, and measure it and see what happens. But we don't.
So I know you're getting your master's in public health. Not everybody is going to have their master's in public health. For people who do not have that kind of education, if you could give them one tip on how to sift through information, what would it be?
Well, first of all, it helps to just look at a YouTube video on like the difference between studies. Like what is a case control study versus another study, like an intervention trial, for example. That's good. And I suggest everybody do that. You can do that in 5 minutes. Maybe you need to write it down or maybe draw some little images to make sure you remember it. But it's good to just go through studies slowly and find that one word you don't understand, type it in and learn it, and look at the visuals on it so it's really in there, and just go through it step by step and put the pieces, fill in the blanks, because none of this language is that complicated. Like hyperlipidemia just means too much fat in your blood. Hyperlipidemia is a really crazy word that probably 99% of the population doesn't know, but it's simple. It's a concept that everybody can get. So just going through it. And like that was one where I even read some science that was too intense, like on studying multiple sclerosis. I think there was some like oligodendroproteins or something. And I was like, what is this? And I'm like, oh, it's actually just the protein around your brain cell. That's like around the myelin sheath of your brain cell. And it's like, actually all of this is pretty simple. And so it's just a matter of putting a little bit of time in and getting those terms. Yeah.
And I also think finding sources that you can trust. Never believe anything. Always do your own research on stuff. But finding people whose word you more or less trust, I think, can be really, really helpful. And definitely check out Mike the Vegan's channel, and also MikeTheVegan.com. That's MICTheVegan.com.
Like a microphone.
Yeah. And thank you so much to Balance for Life Florida for hosting this awesome event of vegan leaders. This has been awesome. Well, as always, if you have any questions or anything you want to see or hear answered, just let me know in the comments down below, and we will talk to you soon.
Goodbye.